Chapter 34. The Rescuer. Red sat on the edge of the cliff for a long time after they had gone. She felt as though someone had scooped out her insides and left her hollow. She didn't know what to do. Ace and Chester wanted her to go on to the Vorpal Mountain, she knew. Her mother wanted her to rule like she did. She looked to her left toward the Hall of Mirrors, and to her right toward the edge of the desert and the path back into the forest. She could go to Bramble Bay, steal a boat, and head into the endless sea and whatever lay beyond it, leaving all this behind. Red looked down at the muddy red stains from the moat in her lap. She would always be Red, the daughter of the Queen of Hearts, no matter how hard she tried or how far she ran. Wasn't her ruined dress proof of that? Even if Red had the courage to break away and start a new life, it would never last. She would always be tied to Wonderland, and she was still tied to her friends. An accusing little thought thrummed alongside the beat of her heart. You care, you care, you care. Red clutched her jaw. And so what? She'd always wanted friends, and somehow she'd gotten them. Now she had to fight for them. Red gritted her teeth and began the slow climb down the cliff, back toward the capital as the setting sun blazed scarlet against her skin. Red had nothing as she sprinted back into the forest. No money, no identification, only the dress on her body and shoes on her feet. But she had a reputation, and she still had the look. There was a little lodging camp, she knew, somewhere at the edge of the desert and within the royal woods. Though night was falling when she finally heard the song and axe on wood, Red went boldly forward until she came into a clearing with little uniform huts, blazing fires, and high stacks of felled treetop trunks. There was a group of men standing around one fire, talking in low voices and drinking from mugs. "Hello," Red said, but her voice came out mild, and nobody turned. She hardened her hands into fists and closed her eyes. Then she thought of her mother and yelled. "Excuse me," she shouted. The men fell silent and turned, staring wide-eyed at the girl in their midst, who must have looked covered with blood. "Hello," Red said again, lifting her chin and putting on the look. "I am the daughter of the Queen of Hearts, and these are my royal woods. I require one of your horses in order to return to the castle. If you would lend me your fastest, please." There was a long beat of silence, and then one of the men seemed to recover enough to speak. "Well, hello, Princess Red. What a surprise to welcome you to our camp," he said. He smirked at her. "The woods are a rough place for royalty, I see. I can understand why you'd like to return to the castle at once." "That's insolent," Red said coolly. "I need a horse, not a conversation." "I'm afraid our horses have bedded down for the night," the lodger said, his smile still mild but his voice a bit harder. "You may own these woods, but you do not own our horses. We'll give you a place to stay, and one of my men here can take you back in the morning." "I must go tonight," Red said through gritted teeth, "and I could take myself back." The man looked her up and down. "I highly doubt that." Then he added as an afterthought, "Your Highness." Red took a step forward, then another. The other men were smirking now, and one of them chuckled. "Spitting image of your lovely mother you are," he said. That did it. Red rushed forward, seized one of the men's mugs, and threw it with all her strength into the fire. The pottery shattered, and its contents billowed into flame, sparks flying onto one lodger's jacket and setting it ablaze. The man yelped and rushed to pat out the fire as Red stood and watched, working her jaw. While he inspected the singed fabric, Red turned to the first man again. "A horse," she said. "Now." Red had bluffed. She wasn't the best rider, but she gripped the horse's reins tight, one arm clinging to its neck as she spurred the animal faster and faster with the heels of her tennis shoes. They flew through the forest, the horse navigating tangled roots and twisting paths in the swinging light of the lantern the lodgers had given her. Everything hinged on the hope that the Queen of Hearts had not inflicted any sort of punishment on the boys yet. Red refused to even consider that possibility, If they were brought back to the castle, they were likely to be in the dungeons, an awful, damp place below moat level. Red never went down there if she could help it, and she hated to think of them there. Red would never make it to the dungeons, or on the castle grounds, for that matter, undetected. It was sure to be swarming with soldier cars, and she had no way of knowing where her mother would be. Red knew the hedge maze better than anyone, but it wouldn't do any good if she got caught the moment she stepped in. Red chewed her lip as she rode, thinking hard, slowly above the trees, as she began to catch glimpses of the high turrets and peaks of the castle, blazing in the sky despite the late hour. It looked as though every room was lit up, every light turned on. Red knew her mother wouldn't be getting any sleep tonight, just like Red. When she came back to the familiar roads, Red eased the horse into a trot and guided it off the side of the road. Both she and the beast breathed hard, and she patted down its neck and flank. "Good job," she whispered. She slid off its back and staggered on wobbly legs to its muzzle. "Go on, then. Go home." Red watched the horse whinny and looped back into the forest, disappearing into the night. She was alone again, but maybe not for long. Red went the rest of the way on foot, slipping through the trees and wrapping her arms around herself against the cold night. At last she came out by the hedge maze, near the very spot where she so often used to meet Chester on their way to school. Things looked rather different now. Lines of soldier carts were marching in and out of the maze, and huge jubjub birds were circling in the sky. Red scanned her surroundings. If the hedges were a little more solid, she could have gone along the top, but it was too likely she'd be seen or fall through. Re-entering the castle through the tunnel was possible, but then she'd come out right in the middle of the Grand Hall, which was sure to be War Room headquarters. As she watched, Red saw a general soldier cart come out of the maze and stand guard by himself at its entrance. Unlike the other cars, he wore a full-face helmet, which glinted silver in the moonlight. He was shorter than the others she'd seen and carried no weapon apart from the ceremonial heart-tipped staff, which only hurt if it whacked you. Red's heart began to thrash in her chest. She waited until the next line of soldier carts had passed from view, and then, without giving herself time to think about it, sprinted silently up to the short general and grabbed him from behind. He started, but she wrenched the staff from his hand and turned it horizontally, wedging it up under his arm so he could only flail. With the strength that came solely from the adrenaline coursing through her veins, Red dragged the general backward into the trees. He struggled against her, but couldn't see who'd captured him, and when Red threw him to the ground, she reached immediately for his helmet. It was stuck fast to his head. She wrestled him, putting her full weight on his back, and grappled with the iron headwear, trying to figure out how to get it off. Then Red noticed a notch in the helmet, a little heart-shaped hole that looked as though it was made for a key. "Stop it!" Red hissed, bracing herself against him. "What's this thing in your helmet?" There was no answer, but it looked like the piece of armor wouldn't otherwise come off. Red pressed one elbow against his neck and reached in her hair with her other hand, hunting for a stray bobby pin that had managed to stay in since their escape. She found one and shoved it into the keyhole, rattling it around until some mechanism clicked open. Red used both hands to yank the helmet off his head, and he rolled over. Her mouth fell open. She'd never been sure exactly what was under the armor of the soldier cars, or what they became when they joined the Queen's rank, but she had never expected to recognize the person beneath. It was none other than the boy from the unparty, the young one who had stolen the tarts and been taken away by the guards at the Queen's command. As soon as the helmet was off, he blinked and looked around wildly. "Where am I?" he asked. What's going on?" "You're a soldier card," Red said, bewildered. The boy made a face. "No, I'm not. He trailed off, looking down at the heavy armor he wore. He tugged at the arm shields, and Red helped him out of the suit. "You mean you don't remember?" The boy didn't answer. He looked very dazed. What did she do to you? Red whispered. The boy watched her as she lifted the chest plate and mail over her own head. It doesn't matter. I'm going to take care of this, okay? You go. You run as fast as you can. The boy shook his head, backing away. Go! Red snarled, and he stumbled and broke into a run, hurrying deeper into the royal woods. Red looked at the helmet warily. The locking mechanism was now broken. She placed it over her head, and it still latched, but she could get it off and on easily, which she tested a couple times, taking the helmet off again. She picked up the heart staff he had dropped and lowered the helmet over her head once more. Red stood before the castle, ready for a fight.